I'm going to talk over the video, and we're going to learn a little bit more about what happened during this case. So in order to do this, I've got to share my screen with you. So let me, I'm going to share screen 2 so you can see that screen. Okay, cool. So can everyone see my screen? You should see a parking lot. Can we see the screen? Yes?
Yeah,
okay.
All good.
Cool, cool, cool. Great. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what's happening as we go through. This is the outside of our center. And right now, a penguin has arrived after a 2-hour drive from a local colony. That's our vet, Natasha. That's Romy. And this little guy has come in, and we're quite worried because he has a long strand of fishing line coming out of his mouth. So it seems like this guy was swimming out in the ocean. Someone was fishing with some bait on the end of the hook, or maybe this guy had caught a fish, and then this penguin went and swallowed that whole thing. So what's happening here is that the penguin has been put under anesthetic. So we can put him to sleep and check what's going on. And we're going to perform an X-ray. We also wound up just taping a little bit of that fishing line to the beak so that it doesn't get yanked. So you guys should see something. What do we see inside the stomach? I can see what looks like a fishing hook. So inside the birds, we've got a fishing hook, which we're quite worried about. And this is also a great way to show us what it is an X-ray does. So we know that an X-ray takes a look inside of our body, but it can look especially at our bones, and it can even pick up that nice hook there. Now, we're a little bit worried, and I want you guys to think about if you were the doctor here. So this is Natasha, and she's looking at this X-ray, and she sees this hook in the tummy. Have a little discussion in the class now. What do you think you would do? How would you try to get that hook out the tummy? I'm going to leave you for about 30 seconds to have a chat with your friend. What would you do to get the hook out of the penguin's tummy? All right, so some of you might be saying things like, I would cut open the tummy, and then I would just take the hook out. Or maybe I'd go and I'd just cut a very small hole in the tummy, and I'd go in with a special tool, and I'd cut the hook and just pull out little bits of the hook at a time. So let's see what we did here at SANCCOB to get that hook out of the tummy. Now, our vet, Natasha, she'd never needed to pull a hook out of a penguin before. And she was quite worried because she's explaining here in the video that if they just pull the hook straight out, they could risk hooking it onto something else in the penguin and cutting the penguin open. She's also worried because if she just cuts the tummy open and removes the hook that way, that it's going to take the penguin a very long time to get better. So we're quite worried about what's going to happen with this guy. Natasha decides that what's best to do is to call in. Stephen is our boss here at SANCCOB, and he's also a vet. And he's going to come up with a clever solution to remove the hook from the tummy. So on the screen here, you'll see that Rhiannon, one of the rehabbers, she's dressed in purple. That's a special padding that she needs to wear during the X-ray. You see, X-rays aren't actually very good for us if we get them a lot. So she wears that padding so that the X-rays don't cause any trouble for her. This is Stephen. He's talking about what he's going to do to make the penguin better. We've never tried it before, so hopefully it'll work. What they've decided to do is to insert something over the fishing line and down into the penguin's body. So you'll see Stephen's got a pipe there, and he's going to put the pipe around the hook and just pull everything up in one go. So let's see how it goes. Our patient has been put to sleep. And Stephen has a long metal pipe, which he puts down into the penguin's body, but he can't get a good lodge in the hook. So what they decide to do next is to use some garden hose. So they take garden hose, they pushed it down into the penguin's tummy, over the line. They think they've got the hook lodged into it. So let's see what happens. They're pulling it back out, and there's the hook on the end. So they managed to use a garden hose to get the hook out of the penguin's tummy, which is a pretty cool story. I always really liked this case. All right, so you're back on me now. That was a really interesting case that we had here at the center. That penguin, he got the nickname Bruiser because he was a very feisty, aggressive penguin. He would always bite us and flip us, slap us, and he was a very, very strong penguin. What's really amazing is after that surgery, 3 weeks later, Bruiser was released back into the wild. He was strong and healthy, and we'd managed to do a good job of pulling that hook out of his stomach just using a garden hose, which is quite funny when you think about it. Penguins sometimes face issues when it comes to the way that people catch their fish. Not only penguins, but other seabirds as well. That's why whenever you're out, if you do go fishing, make sure if you have lines or gut or hooks or things like that, that you take it back home with you. Don't just leave it on the beach for another animal to pick up. We've had quite a few birds that have gotten themselves caught in fishing lines, or have even gotten hooks caught in their beak or through their eye, or something quite terrible actually. So be careful when you go out fishing, or if you have friends that fish, and make sure that they take their tackle home with them and that they're responsible about it. So I'm actually going to leave it there at that interesting case about Bruiser, the penguin that had a hook in his stomach, and I'm going to open this up to questions. So if anyone would like to ask me something, or you want to ask Stubby something, we're both here to answer your questions. So I think let's start off at a class, and then we'll get the class to ask 2 questions each, and we'll just filter between each class like that.
Awesome, perfect. All right, so we can start with Mr. Cox's class. Do you guys, let me see, I have to find your class. There you are. You guys have questions that you'd like to ask?
Anaya.
What's the penguin's name?
This is Stubby. She has the name because of her short, stubby flippers. That's a good question. Thank you.
Mason.
What if the hose didn't work? Like, how would they get it out with the hose?
If the hose didn't work, that penguin would have been in big trouble. You see, when we eat things, they don't just stay in one part of our body. They'll actually move through our tummy into our intestines. It's quite a long trip for the food that we eat. So what would happen is over time, that hook would start to move to a different part of that penguin's body. If it got caught along the way, it would cut open the penguin on the inside, and it would make the bird very, very sick. In some cases, when stuff like that happens and we eat things that are sharp or could hurt us on our insides, some people and some birds have even died because of things like that. So I'm very glad that the hose worked. She's saying, yes, I'm also very glad. I'm very glad about this hose. That's a good question. Thank you.
All right, so we can move on to Mrs. Boehm's class.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, okay, careful.
There we go.
Okay, and we're unmuted now, so go ahead and ask your question.
Does any other animals eat penguins?
Do any other animals eat what? Sorry?
Do any animals eat
Penguins.
penguins?
Yes. So sharks, fur seals, there's some kinds of whales that eat penguins. Penguin eggs can also be eaten by snakes or mongoose. Here in South Africa, we've had penguins that have been eaten by caracals, that have been eaten by leopards. Sometimes you'll even find that they have other predators that don't necessarily eat them, but can cause problems. Cats or dogs are a good example. So sometimes maybe some of you have cats at home. They could catch a garden bird, but they don't necessarily eat that bird. It's just part of their natural hunting instincts. Yes, I know. She's saying, no, not the garden birds. No. So there are also some larger birds that eat penguins. I've seen footage of giant petrels eating penguins, which is quite interesting. And I've also seen kelp gulls, which are bigger seagulls, eating small African penguin chicks. That's a good question. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
How do penguins talk to each other?
That's a very good question. Penguins talk to each other in a few ways. They have a bray, which is kind of like a ooh, I'm sorry, I gave you a fright kind of noise that they make. You've heard Stubby bray a few times while we've been chatting. So it can mean different things. The bray can be a happy bray. It can be an angry bray, like leave me alone, I'm so mad, I'm going to bite you. The bray could be a romantic bray. It could say, hello, Mr. Penguin, I'm Mrs. Penguin, and I'm so happy to see you. So that, you know, it's about context, you know. They can also talk to each other. They have certain body language when they're snaking their head at you like this. This can mean that they're getting ready to bite you. They're checking you out. They're like, who's this person coming to cause trouble with me? Also, they can extend their necks quite a bit, and they can make themselves taller and thinner to try and, you know, make themselves seem a little bit bigger or move along. And I also see sometimes when couples are fighting with each other, that they'll get close to the ground and snake their heads at each other, and shaking their head is also a big one. You'll see Stubby is kind of like, oh, she was there. She was shaking her head because she was really happy. They can also communicate by using their beaks. So you'll see, if you look carefully, that Stubby's beak is moving. She's busy cleaning my feathers. So this is also a sign of affection amongst penguins. And they'll clean the feathers of their chicks or of their partner. That's a good question. Thank you.
Awesome. So we'll jump to Mrs. Scott's class. Do we have any questions over at Mrs. Scott's class?
You would ask your question? Okay.
What do they eat?
What do they eat?
Ah.
So an African penguin is a seabird. This means that they live by the sea and their food comes from the ocean. So they typically will eat fish. They enjoy sardines, pilchards, and mackerel. Not all penguins only eat fish though. Some will like to eat, you know, crustaceans or squid, like think of calamari. Some will even eat things that are a lot smaller. It's based on where they live. Yes, I hear you, I know. It's based on where they live and also how big they are. Some penguins have much bigger beaks, much bigger mouths, and they are bigger, so they're going to eat bigger things. That's a good question. Thank you.
Do we have any others at Mr. Scott's class?
I think we have one more.
Did you want to know how to talk?
No, that would be
Okay, come right up here to the front and then let's look right here and ask your question.
How does the penguin walk?
They waddle, like they move from side to side. I can pop her on the floor. Let's see if she does walk around. Are you gonna walk around? Okay, I'm gonna put her down.
Wow.
There she goes.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So you'll see, like, she kind of moves her body from side to side. She's busy checking out something there.
That's a cool penguin you have.
It's pretty cool, actually. There's also, there's some research that says that they move so much from side to side because it kind of like helps them gain momentum as they're walking around. So for these guys, they're just going to waddle from side to side. It is quite funny when they do run, because they do run sometimes, not very fast because their legs are so short. But it's quite cute because normally their flippers are going to go a little bit to the side and they're like, oh, trying to run around. But I always think of penguins kind of looking like how people walk when they have their pants around their ankles. You know, they've got like this very awkward look to them, like they're about to fall over. They kind of look like little Charlie Chaplins when they're walking around.
I got boots on mine. I walk better like.
Awesome. So we'll move on to Mr. Taylor's class. I know you guys joined in a bit late, but do we have any questions here?
Anybody have a question? Adrian, how would you ask that one, number one?
Have there been any climate effects that are changing the penguins' habits?
I didn't quite hear that, sorry.
He asked if there's any climate effects that are changing penguin habits in Africa. We know about polar ice melting affecting polar bears, and I would imagine penguins in Antarctica. So we're just wondering if they've seen anything.
I'm sorry, like, I've heard what you were saying about the polar bears and the melting ice caps, but the beginning part, your core question, was a bit distorted. So do you mind one more time? Sorry.
In Africa, for the penguins, is there any sort of adaptations they're making to, I guess, adapt to changing climate?
Okay, thank you. So with the birds that live here, a lot of people wonder, you know, do these birds handle well in the heat? Because they're penguins, they're supposed to live in the snow. So most penguins actually don't live in the snow. They live in countries like Australia, New Zealand, Peru, South Africa, and even the Galapagos Islands, which is close to the equator, the warmest part of our planet. So these penguins that live in warmer climates, they do have some adaptations that make them handle being in those kinds of environments better. You'll find that these guys are generally a bit smaller. Our penguins that live where it's super cold, they're bigger. They have more fat. Their feathers are more dense. They have more feathers, you know, to keep themselves super duper toasty. You'll also find something that's quite cool is that around Stubby's eyes, are you going to come back or she's just, oh no, she's on her own little mission now. No, she's on a mission. Around Stubby's eye, you won't be able to see it. Oh, she's just playing with the broom, sorry. Around her eyes, she's got like this little patch of skin. It's called an orbital gland. And what's quite interesting is that when the African penguin gets warmer, this gland becomes a brighter pink color. So that works in a way that when the penguin goes swimming, they cool off much quicker because the patch of skin there isn't covered by feathers. The rest of their body that has feathers on it, it's waterproof. You know, it's like they've got a really good scuba suit on. So the pink around the eye, that's going to cool off really quickly because it's just skin that's being exposed to cold water. So they do have their adaptations. Also, the black on their back does help a little bit with heat. Yeah, but what makes them adapt to the temperatures the best actually is how they make their homes. So when African penguins nest, they don't sit in a tree or they'll just pop on the ground. Generally, they like to burrow. That doesn't happen as much now due to habitat loss. But before, they would actually dig into the ground and they'd make these little burrows that they would go in. And it was great in there. It wasn't too hot. It wasn't too cold. It was just the perfect place to set up a house and raise a chick. That's a good question, sir. Thank you.
Do you have any other questions, Mr. Taylor's class? Anything else?
Any more? Yeah, go ahead, Isabel.
You said you had a vet on staff, but do all the workers have formal training?
Can you repeat the question, sorry?
Yo.
You said you had a vet on staff, but do all the workers have formal training? And if so, what training do they have?
Yeah, so there are people that work for SANCCOB, and we also have people that work in the field at the colonies. So the people that work here, generally they've studied things like animal behavior and nature conservation. I studied education and then environmental education. It's on staff, but they don't all work as the vet. We have our vet, then our executive director's a vet, our head of research is a vet. But there are also some people here that have studied things that don't really have anything to do with penguins. We have someone that's an entomologist. This is a person that studies insects. We have someone here that's an anthropologist. That's someone that studies people and cultures, and that's got nothing to do with penguins at all. I was actually a maths teacher originally by training, you know, and here I am. And we also have some people that work here that didn't study at university at all, but they're here because they're passionate and they love the work. So, you know, I think when it comes to deciding what you want to do and what kind of training you want to go into, it's probably really worth thinking about, you know, when it comes to careers in conservation, just giving it a try first. So most of the people that work here are actually volunteers, and we have people that are students and they haven't started studying, or they're busy studying, and they have no idea if this is what's right for them. But they come around and they give it a try, and then it kind of steers them in the direction, and they think, okay, I'm really interested in this, or I'm glad I did that because that's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. That's a good question. Thank you.
So I think we have time for one more question from every class. So we'll go back to Mr. Cox's class.
Zoe.
Why is his flipper so small?
She was bitten when she was about 2 or 3 days old, and this caused an infection, and then it caused her flippers not to develop properly. So she got sick really young, and it caused some growth issues. You know, but even though she's got her shorter flippers, she's still, what she lacks in flipper, she makes up for in heart. She's a lovely penguin chick. Thank you. That's a lovely question.
All right, now we'll go to Mrs. Bowen's class. If you guys have a final question.
Actually, there are teachers here to collect them, but we do have a few questions. Can we email them to you?
Yes, you can.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. It was lovely, but the kids have to leave now. Okay. Thank you.
Bye, guys. All right, so we can jump over to Mr. Scott's class, oh, there we go. Do we have any final questions at Mrs. Scott's class?
We have one here.
Awesome.
How old is she?
How old is that?
She's 2 years old. She's only 2. But if she lives in captivity, like here at the center, she can live up to her 40s. So she's still got a long, happy life ahead of her. That's a good question. Thank you.
Awesome. And then we can go back to Mr. Bruiser's class.
Canada, we could ask.
Do you guys have any questions?
Now you want to ask? We were wondering if it's legal to have a pet penguin in South Africa or not.
No, definitely not. And you also wouldn't want a penguin as a pet. You know, I think from what we've seen in movies and growing up with films like Happy Feet and Mr. Popper's Penguins and all that, we really come to associate penguins with being super friendly, super cute, take home with you kind of animals, but they're not. They're incredibly aggressive animals. So Stubby is an ambassador penguin, and for her to sit on my lap has taken hundreds of hours of training. If you go to the pound and you pick up a dog, you don't need to spend a couple hundred hours with it until it's going to sit with you, you know? These animals are naturally very aggressive and they can hurt you, eh? So I wouldn't say you'd want a penguin as a pet. Also, they poop all the time. Like, she's gone to the bathroom, I'm not even joking, like 5 times since this lesson has started. Just on my lap here, I've got a towel, and she's just constantly making little penguin poops into it, which is just great. So I think they'd be very messy pets, super messy. And can you imagine trying to keep your pool clean if you had a penguin swimming in it all the time? Yo, what a mission. So you can't have them as pets, but I don't think you'd want to either. They are gorgeous, though. Very beautiful animals. That's a good question. Thank you, sir.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our hangout. So thanks everyone for joining us. I'll unmute everyone's mics, and you guys can give a nice big yell and a goodbye and a thank you. So yeah, thanks for
Thanks, guys.
time with us, and thanks to Stubby there for hanging out with us too. Bye, guys.